Thank you. Thank you, folks. Thank you for coming. I think it's been about at least 5.5 years when we did the first Tech Field Day. So I think we've grown about the same rate as Tech Field Day. The last time we did was in the Bay Area. I'm not sure exactly what the event was in the early days of Tech Field Day. How many of you were in that event? None.
No, it was one or two, and I didn't start till 3.
Yeah, perfect. It must have been like late 2010. So very early on, Stephen was trying to get this program going, and we jumped in to help. We were going, and so this was a great way to synchronize back. So hopefully what we're trying to get to, I know you took an enormous amount of time to come here. We'll try to cover as much as possible in the 2 hours. I'm going to start with a quick update for just 20 minutes or so. And then we'll really get down into the next level of detail, right down to what you guys really love, which is more of the demos that tied into actual technologies. Just as a summary for the company is about 6.5 years old. Started late 2009. We've grown quite a bit since then. We sell in 37 countries, about predominantly large enterprises, mid and large enterprises, and service providers. People who have 40 terabytes to several petabytes at a time of actual production data, and I'll tell you a little more about what production data for us means. How many of you know about copy data? I know I saw your email about your blog about your view of where we were, and then a whole bunch of stuff since then. But how many of you know much about what Actifio does, what copy data is? I think that there's a general theme. I think it's important to identify. Unfortunately, we don't fit nicely into a stack. We're not like a faster, better storage device, hyper-converged, whatever the little stacks that we know of. So I think I'll take a few minutes to give you some history of how we came about this one. I was an investor for a while, and I used to work with Howard trying to get his business up in the early days, and trying to get his help on validating some of the investments we were making. And in that process of trying to look at the evolution of where enterprise IT was going, we saw some very interesting things from companies that were very different, the social media kind of companies. And I'll give you a view of what that was like, and then jump to how we ended up where we ended up. Very, very simple. At the end of the day, and I'll oversimplify this to call it an application. And it could be a 3-tier app, it could be your traditional SQL, could be just Oracle database, running in some kind of a container, VM, physical machine, doesn't matter what it is. End of the day, all of these apps begin with creating, consuming, processing some kind of a data that's in a container. And there is a tremendous amount of investment in this part of the business, production story. We call this production story. This is the story this is the data that applications create, consume, everything that we know of. The document you're writing right now is right here, right? And over the last 6 years, about $7-8 billion spent in innovating this space: flash storage, fast storage, cheap storage, cloud storage, hyperconverged storage. But there was a bigger story. What we saw was a much bigger story that was going on behind this one, which is a dirty secret of the storage market. And I've been in the storage business for a long time, all the way from in 1990. And I've helped create some of these problems, so it was very easy to see some of these issues, right? The first thing you see is, okay, I've created data, but by God, if I'm not going to lose this data. So it's very important for me to find a way to protect this data. And I need to protect it over a long term, so I need some media that is cheaper than this disk. So I'm going to pick, a tape. Now I also know that blocks on tape stream, but blocks on a disk media are random access. And so I've got to figure out how to convert this to this. So about 30 years ago, a wonderful piece of software called backup was invented. Began with a simple job. Hey, get this data, convert it back, and when you need it, convert it back onto the disk, put it up there, and you have some kind of a standard storage protocol and some kind of a physical interface to run this protocol on. And this is how It was, and this was great. Backup was great. I mean, in fact, what is amazing is just this insurance program is a $7 billion software business today. It's remarkable. All it does is a little of this conversion and a lot of underlying management of infrastructure. And that was great as the data size grew. Obviously, you worry about the fact that this was maybe once a day. You retain this for maybe weeks to months, and you worry about what happens to this site if something goes wrong. So they put it on a truck and right down the road is a company called Iron Mountain that we all ship it off to, put it in an ice vault and put that tape out there.
And then we lose the piece of paper that says which tapes are in which box.
and then you talk about compliance and say, hey, I followed the Sarbox process and I'm not responsible for what happened to the technology. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But this was a way to say I got it secure. So the first set of people who care about this data, what we call the custodians of data, these are the ops people. The ops people. First thing they did was this business. Data became bigger. It wasn't possible to get it done once a day. Also, I needed more frequently. I couldn't capture this once a day and survive. So I will invent. The storage team, the storage industry came up and said, hey, I could do something better. I can sell you this new piece of software called Snapshot. And boy, it does some incredible stuff. It makes a copy of this data, same random access format, and allows you to keep more frequent copies. And this may be, captured every few hours, and you can keep it around for a few days. Quick capture, quick restore, but expensive. And then, of course, you worry about, what happens if this site goes away? And I need business resilience. Sure enough, the storage industry comes to the rescue once again and comes up with another piece of software that you do called replication. And of course, they're glad to sell you the exact same box one more time so that you can keep a copy of the data back here. I mean, for those who think that storage people don't have a great marketing tool, this is a phenomenal marketing story. I mean, if you think about the fact that all I need to do is find a way to sell this one box, and somehow I can sell you an ecosystem of boxes around. And that was just on this side. This is just to protect my data. Then there was a whole bunch of other people that we started seeing more often. This is now 7 years ago. We started seeing more often people developing applications, people running analytics, people doing all kinds of stuff. And they were on this side. They were the consumers of data. Right? And these consumers, on the development side, had to go ask the operations people for some data. They would get some data. They would get a storage box. And if there were 15 developers, you would need 15 different storage volumes. And you would get a copy of this on your own, partly because I really couldn't touch anything on this side. This was production stuff. I'm not going to touch any of this stuff, so I need my own independent copy. Then there were people doing test. Then there were people doing QA. Then there were people doing analytics. But bottom line, the paradigm was simple, right? The paradigm was every time an application needed data, just make a copy, buy more storage, and create a phenomenal $25 to $100 billion business selling storage boxes. Same data over and over again. Different frequencies, different retention times, different SLAs on what to do with the data. We saw this picture and said, wow, what a phenomenal business. All I have to do is figure out if I can sell this one, and I have a proprietary, and there's a reason why EMC spent well over, I think something like $12 billion acquiring companies in this space a long time ago. So we saw this as a very interesting opportunity. And then data domain came along about 14 years ago, 2002, if I remember. They basically changed the paradigm to say, hey, instead of using tape, let me replace this tape with a disk that pretends to be tape. And this backup pretends like it's writing to disk. And the whole mantra was, hey, let me get rid of this entire tape business. Not only
they said, it sucks.
But it sucks, exactly. Tape sucks. And by the way, I can also replicate this to another of these data domain that can then go to Vault, so I can get rid of a lot of this stuff. Remarkable, complete change. I mean, to this day, one of the biggest displacements in the storage industry in terms of replacing this. Incredible job. Then suddenly you see a very interesting paradigm. By the way, Data Domain was one of the companies that we were working very closely. And one of the things that you start seeing is everything is on disk for the first time. And rather than pretend like tape, our process was, why don't we just think about having these applications directly talk to the disk? If they can talk to this disk, they can surely talk to this disk. Let them talk to the disk directly, write data in random format on a programmatic basis every so often, whatever time frame you think it is relevant for, and then manage the data and its life cycle completely through a software on these volumes. First casualty is data is kept directly in native application native format. No more conversion required. I mean, the reason you did conversion was because the media required conversion. If I'm writing to disk, why am I converting to begin with? And the first casualty of that
because
paradigm,
the software that I've been using to write to tape insists on it.
Exactly. So the first casualty of doing this is dead.
One could only wish.
We'll give you examples of how we have taken out the whole notion of backup software as a software being gone. And that if it was just that, if it was just all we did was that paradigm shift changed the notion of using backup software, that was okay. But what became even more clear was, hey, I can capture data very quickly, and just like I can read off the disk, I can actually restore it quickly. So why the heck do I need this? And by the way, I'm replicating this. If it's not synchronous replication, I don't need this either. Oh, and by the way, this looks like disk. It acts like disk. I can read my data back anytime I want. I can get a virtual copy. So why am I waiting for my operations guys to give me independent copies anymore? I can literally have each of these folks read my copies off of one golden copy and literally have a ton of footprint gone. That was the original thesis. The thesis was this notion of this inverted pyramid of this being the primary data and a whole boatload of independent copies being made because of historical reasons could be virtualized and changed to a very, very different paradigm. And this wasn't a storage problem, if you think about what went on. This wasn't making backup better. This wasn't making replication better or snapshot better. This was fundamentally a problem of managing data better. And this is why I said it doesn't fit nicely into the stack that we all know of in the IT ecosystem. What we set out to do was to go change the way people manage data, allow it to be reused over and over again, and dramatically drive down the overall cost. We are not a storage company. I'll tell you a little more about what we do. In fact, the only thing storage about us is the fact that we have an interface to a VM, to a server that looks like a storage system, but we're fundamentally a software company. So we started out with this investment thesis, and what we end up looking like is you have the exact same app in its own little container, doing its exact same thing. Nothing changes here. This could be running in Amazon, this could be running in containers, could be running in VM. We have no idea what it's doing. All we know is there's an app and it produces data, and there's a piece of software that captures the data through various standard interfaces, nothing proprietary. Very standard interfaces, fiber channel, iSCSI, NFS, things that we know how to connect to servers with. And then in addition to capturing data, we capture some more things. A long time ago, I used to work on SCSI standards, way back in 1990. I built the very first SCSI chip. I built the very first RAID controller. So I've been in the storage business for a long time. And we made some fatal mistakes. We made mistakes of creating storage and storage protocols as something that is independent, non-routable. It is something that you connect to a server. And there was no context. So what we decided was if you want to manage data, data needs to have context. So we added the context. You capture data. We added the context of which application did this come from. We added the context of what time was this data created. And thirdly, we added the context of what's the SLA? What's the life cycle of this data throughout its life? Because data has a life. Unlike networking components or compute components, data has a life. And then we have a single piece of software that manages its entire life cycle from the time it's captured to the time it's eventually deleted. Now that means a couple of things, right? One, there's a theme of how do you capture data, how do you manage it, and how do you reuse it? And I'll show you how that part. So this capture part is all about going directly to the application. We have customers like Netflix who sometimes run applications on their in their data center, sometimes off in the cloud. We have no idea where they're running applications. We have several customers who literally port their applications off to someplace else. I have no idea. This could be running on a tin can and a string. All we know is how to engage with an application, and we know what this application does in terms of its data. So we capture it very, very efficiently. The management is throughout its life cycle. Now the question is, throughout life cycle, I need to manage the life cycle of this data by putting it in various pools. Here it's in raw format. It's kept in its native format for the short term. It's kept in a long-term format, in a deduplication format for longer term. This could be kept in an archive format, or this could be used for disaster recovery remote format. And these are pools of storage. This could be anything. You literally have users coming in with, I'm going to buy some cheapest storage I've got, give it to you guys. And this could be Amazon AWS S3, this could be Google Nearline. The idea is you have completely abstracted storage down to the basic resource it was supposed to be when we first built the storage controller, which was reliable, robust, high performance place I can dump data into, and somebody else manage the entire life cycle. Then it comes to reuse. Since we have this information, so we are managing billions and billions of objects. What this looks like, it looks like a distributed object file system with one single global namespace. Doesn't matter where you connect to Actifio. There's an API, there's an interface, and it looks exactly like a storage system. I can have any application literally recreate the data I want. I want Oracle from 14 days ago. I know Oracle, I know 14 days ago, and I know where those blocks are. I immediately reconstitute them. They look like it almost looks like a storage system, except the data that we compose for that volume, for that share, is done instantly. It's not done because somebody put it out there. And that changes the entire game of, if you want to recover a file, the whole notion of backup is now about instant recovery. 20 terabytes of database. In fact, we now have a 110 terabyte database that comes up in minutes. It would take weeks, months to restore something like that. We're able to bring up, and we'll do a lot of these demos, we're able to bring up entire data centers, complete data centers in 20 minutes on a remote site. Partly because we've changed the game. What we've done is a technology that decouples management of data and all the components required to manage its life cycle. We need replication, absolutely. We are the most efficient way of replicating data, partly because we are very, very efficient in capturing data. Every component of applications we interface with is about being very efficient, capturing only changes, very efficient in managing where we store, how we store, and how much you consume, the bandwidth that's required to move data, and finally how you restore and reconstitute and resynthesize the actual application data. I mean, the whole notion, if you think about it, is in a world where the cloud infrastructure as a service is available, all I need is to pour data into this one and recreate. So there's an entire orchestration tools we'll show you that takes data as a foundation and allows you to recreate either a file, a database, an application, the entire data center. And it changes the way you think about what Actifio transform. Now the question is, in many cases, what do you buy it for? And I'll tell you a little more about what people do today and what they've done 5.5 years ago. Does that make sense logically? Pretty straightforward. I mean, the whole theme was there needed to be a tipping point, and the tipping point was elimination of the tape. And the tipping point, big thing if you think about, the tipping point was these people trying to go to a cloud. I cannot go to the cloud or any other platform because I got this entire baggage to carry. I can move my data. I can move this from here to Amazon, but boy, now I got to move all my infrastructure required. My backup guy has to change, my dev test, not anymore. There's one place where all data is managed, or what we call copy data. Remember, that's the difference. The difference here is this is the production data, and that's the entire copy data part. So that's what we set out to do. It's hard to put it, we have analysts who put us in various quadrants, and they put us in 4 different quadrants. You're a backup quadrant, yeah. You're a test data management quadrant, yeah. There are people running analytics on top of Actifio. There are service providers who run, this is a large bank, runs applications. They provide backup and DR as a service, but they also run monthly federal stress tests as part of their service on Actifio. There are 3 startups and 21 other companies that use Actifio as a foundation to get access to data. So just like you go to AWS and call an API to get infrastructure, you can go to Actifio, call an API, and get the data you want. And this we believe is the final frontier to pull together the entire cloud story. Make sense? Any questions? So that was the whiteboard. So let me summarize. The idea is to capture at application. The only thing we know are applications. The only thing. That's all. We have no idea where they run. We have no idea what infrastructure they run on, whether they run on storage systems, they run on convert stuff. We know how to discover apps. We know how to capture this data at block level in the native format in an incremental way. Have a single piece of software that manages across the entire life cycle from the time it's captured to the time it's deleted. Sometimes it could be never deleted. We may manage for 20 years. But the key here is to leverage virtualization by capturing a single, and unlike all the things that we did in the storage world, capture data and the context through metadata. There's a ton of metadata that Actifio has, ton. And use that metadata, come back and say, I can actually recreate anything. I can recreate a file, recreate a database, recreate an entire data center, reuse that thing for many, many different things. And for most users, the way they think about Actifio is in this new world where pretty much all sheet metal is being taken over by APIs. If you think about this notion of a software-defined data center where every component of the infrastructure can be defined through software, we've been able to abstract all that stuff out and really pull together data as the final frontier. In fact, we encapsulate the entire data components, the OS image, the VM image, the operating system itself, the container itself, the network configurations. We can capture the entire data center as data, manage its life cycle, and orchestrate it back, any component of it, very, very securely. I mean, the other part here is these custodians have to worry about making sure the consumers get it in a very secure way. And so security, governance, compliance, and the fact that we sell to some of the largest enterprises, it's a very, very different story. Now, building this stuff, I saw your blog. You saw us as this box that was inline. And we needed to package it as a box because it was easier to sell somebody. Let me just take out this backup, give you a box, plug it in, and put the software on an appliance, on a server, and you buy your own storage. It's evolved from there. It's evolved a lot from there, right? And to build something like this, if you can imagine the scope of what we're talking about, there's a series of things. There's use cases, went from resiliency as the primary one. I mean, taking out backup, it was like shooting fish in the barrel. It's easy to walk into somebody and say, how many of you love your backups? That was easy. But then, since then, that same data is being reused for test data management. Some of the largest financial institutions today, we have 8,000 developers in one of the largest banks in UK, runs on Actifio. All the developers use Actifio. And implicitly, all the Oracle and SQL databases that these developers are using are protected. Backup is free, for free. It comes for free. Same thing in another 2 large financial institutions in New York. Same story, Oracle as a service. And that's just one of the 1,200 or so customers that are out there. Began with resiliency, went into reusing the data for DevOps, test data management stuff, and we'll show you some demos of what that all means. And finally, this big frontier of enterprises wanting to securely go to leverage the cloud, but within the control of me on the operations side. I cannot let my developer run willy-nilly, nor can my developer run a real development without getting production data. How about I give you that capability? I make public cloud, an extension of my data center, securely at scale. Building this, by the way, for a small configuration isn't that hard. Building it where you're managing billions and billions of objects, think about what's going on here. Tons of applications constantly getting ingested, data moving through the entire pipeline, lots of people consuming. There are hundreds of users across the entire organization consuming this thing. Data gets deleted because it expires. Some data is, after 3 months, you want to expire this. There's a lot of stuff happening across these objects, across multiple locations. So it was a fairly complex one. By the time we got it out, it was about 2.5 years since we first started. The biggest part you'll see in the enterprise is, we can't be stuck doing just VMware stuff. There is that financial institution that has an AIX machine, has an AS400 machine, and I have to deal with that. So other than a mainframe, we pretty much cover everything. Everything. And this is important because if I'm an organization, I cannot have a data management policy for 98% of my infrastructure. I need it for all 100% or I don't. I just cannot have, one more legacy backup left. And we'll give you examples of where things have gone completely. Backup is gone. There is no such thing as backup anymore. And we believe by 2019, 2020, backup as a category will be gone. One, driven by the cloud. Two, driven by companies like us. We're focusing on helping you manage data for things to accelerate business rather than just protect it. There's a whole bunch of apps, a series of capabilities that have come along, and we'll show some of those. If you think about what's happening here, there's a lot of things, right? People are capturing at different frequencies, retaining for different frequencies, moving around a lot of stuff. And it has been a complex learning affair for us as we went in enterprise. And this was what you saw. For the first few years, we just sold an appliance. It was easy for us to deploy, easy for us to explain, easy for us to support. Then we started going into a virtual version in the cloud. Pretty much now you can deploy Actifio anywhere. You find a place, assuming a certain size. We're not terribly good we don't sell on the low end of the market. We really are at what I call mid-enterprise and above. And the certification in the process. So last thing I'll leave you with is what people are doing today. And it's in the order of business importance for the CIO. We sell to CIOs. We start with the senior leadership who's saying, I want to go transform. I've already transformed my compute infrastructure. I want to go transform the way data is done. It began with this, but this is becoming almost table stakes for us. Now people want to go back and say, I want to move my business to develop applications faster. I want to help my developers. These are expensive resources. This is a huge OpEx. If I can get out of the business of having my DBAs and my infrastructure guys give them data all day long, instead I can securely make it available for them, this is a huge differentiator. And finally, the ability to outsource things I really don't want to own is becoming a big part of the capability here.